being new at something is challenging, but it's also really fun. So here's my first full-on vlog where I read Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice for the first time, first Jane Austen. And I just record my reflections on that experience, and it was really fun. Bear with me, I ramble on in some areas more than I really should, even after editing. And the sound quality is a little up and down based on whether I was using a mic or not. So with all that said, I hope you enjoy. For my very first Jane Austen, I have chosen Pride and Prejudice. I don't know anything about Jane Austen's, so purely coming from it as an outsider, and I'm just feeling about this kind of romance writing that it's a little too early for me. It's a little too saccharine, and however, I got right into this story because it has an energy to it. I have loosely heard about Elizabeth Bennet and Darcy, but I couldn't have even told you when I started this book who were the two main love interests, and then I saw their names and I thought, oh, okay, I think it's those two. I do like the tension that are these two opposing characters. It creates this sexual energy, this tension, because all of this framework in this time period is about finding someone to marry. And it feels like the women are way more interested in finding the right partner than the men are. The only other female writers that I've read recently from the 1800s, and that would be, I read Jane Eyre, and then I just read the first couple chapters of Wuthering Heights just to get a sense of that book. I like the grittiness, the messiness, the less saccharine feeling of those stories. I think they were written a little later on in the 1800s. I think it's also the mid-1800s. So that's more my style when it comes to eventual romances in a story. So we'll see. I'm early on. This is my first impression. Oh, I want to tell you how far I've gone. I'm up to chapter, is it 14? It's in Roman numerals, which is about page 65 in this Penguin edition. That's my thoughts so far. I'll check in later. Before I start work today, an update. I am finished reading chapter 20. I'm speechless. Is her mother never going to talk to her again? Is she going to banish Lizzie or pretend like she's invisible? I mean, my heart is broken. Now, I do want to say that before my heart was broken by this chapter, I so enjoyed the scene with Mr. Collins and Lizzie's response saying, well, if you're not taking this as my declining your proposal, then I don't know what I have to do or say if you're thinking that every time I refuse you, I'm actually meaning for you to ask me again. And then this scene when the mother goes to the father, Mrs. Bennet goes to Mr. Bennet to try to convince him to tell Lizzie, you're marrying that guy. And then his response, it's just so, I mean, it's high comedy. Anyway, so that's where I'm at so far. I'm up to chapter 21. Hi everyone. This bay window that I'm sitting in is like Chipmunk Central for Suki in the morning. This is where she's usually sitting before work, before my work. So where am I in Pride and Prejudice? I am now well into volume 3, or, you know, maybe, I don't know, halfway into volume 3. It looks like I'm like halfway done or halfway through the book. And Mr. Collins proposed to somebody, Charlotte, 3 days after Lizzie refused him. And so Lizzie's mother, Mrs. Bennet, is very insulted by all of this. And then Lizzie had eyes for a guy named Wickham, it seemed like, and he was acting like he was sweet on her. Jane, her sister, had eyes for a guy named Bingley, I think it is. That's fallen through. And as it turns out, Wickham proposes to, or is sweet on, a girl who has now come into money. And so he's had to stop paying attention to Lizzie. And Lizzie's aunt is saying, like, how dare he drop you for her? And she will not let her aunt get away with the, what is it called? I can't think of the word. Hypocrisy, where her aunt was saying, you can't marry, somebody's not going to marry you because you don't have the money, and it's not proper to get into relationships with people where there isn't a good pairing. And yet her aunt is saying, well, hey, Wickham has gone off and he's marrying money. And Lizzie will just not let her aunt get away with that hypocrisy. So it's interesting to see her personality. So that's what's going on. I'm reading this. I'm finding that I'm reading it in the morning as I finish my War and Peace chapter. So I'll read a little bit. Oh, I am reading it at night sometimes. I'm reading other things too. I happen to be reading a Josephine Hart. This is a new to me author. I'll talk about that book some other time, but I'm going to call it a Gothic book. I had to actually look up what Gothic literature was and if it met the definition. Depends on the definition you use. There's no castle. So I don't know if castle has to be a part of the Gothic genre, but it's got all the other elements. This story does. What's it called? The Stillest Day. It's so intriguing and dark, and it's got an element of the horror in it, and it's a romance kind of. So anyway, all right, well, that's where I am, and I'll check in later. Okay, same day, another update. I read a couple chapters at lunchtime. I mean, wow. So I have just reached chapter 11. I guess I'm still in volume 3. And this is actually chapter 34, it also said. So I had just gone through or gone past the chapter where Elizabeth, walking with Colonel Fitzwilliam, has reason to believe that, right or wrong, she's putting two and two together in her own mind, and she has reason to believe that Darcy had something to do with quashing a potential marriage between Bingley and her sister Jane. So now she's like, she's thinking to herself, who does Darcy think he is? Why would he not think my sister was worthy to marry and all this? No sooner does that happen than Darcy walks into the house that she's staying at of her uncle's. And all of you know this who have read this book, but like, he walks in, she's like completely exasperated about this whole deal. And then he walks in after a silence and in an agitated manner begins, in vain have I struggled. It will not do. My feelings will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you. What? So that's where I stopped. I just stopped because I was like, okay, I gotta go. I gotta go back to work. So that's where I am in the book. Utterly surprised. Who knows what happens next, because there's a whole like half of the book to go. All of you guys know, but I have that to find out.
Morning, too.
I must say that I think I've been calling volume 2 volume 3 because I got further along. I'm up to like 230 some pages, and I turned the page into volume 3. You've probably figured that out already. Yeah, so when I last left off, the marriage proposal had been refused because Lizzie had like 5 things, really like 3 major reasons why she conveyed to Darcy that she would not be marrying him and that he was not a good character. And then he writes this letter, this like 2-page letter, and I loved reading that letter. It's a little confusing, it's a little complex, and then when Jane Austen goes into explaining how Lizzie is feeling about that letter as she lets it digest. Meantime, she's going back home and she is saying nothing to anybody. She is not reaching out to Darcy and saying, well, thank you for your letter. I feel a little differently about you now. Nothing. Even though I think she does feel a little bit differently about him, and maybe she understands some things that she didn't understand, and now she's feeling angry with herself that she jumped to conclusions. She has shared everything with Jane, her sister. But as I just turned into volume 3, what I wanted to share with you is the chapter just thrown in that has to do, that Jane Austen chose to throw in about how Elizabeth feels about her parents' marriage. It's an interesting choice, I thought, but it starts off, had Elizabeth's opinion been all drawn from her own family, she could not have formed a very pleasing picture of conjugal felicity or domestic comfort. And she goes on to basically explain that Mr. Bennet was captivated by youth and beauty and that appearance of good humor. And he married a woman, her mother, whose weak understanding and illiberal mind had very early in their marriage put an end to all real affection for her. That's a pretty bold statement. And she's basically saying that she sees this and says, like, I do not want to have that kind of marriage where I've just now decided that, my wife's level of education and the way she can have discourse and the things that interest her are so trivial to me that I've gone on now to just pay attention to other interests, and there's no real romantic love anymore. I just thought this was such a interesting and advanced thing to add to the story, this reflection chapter. And then just this one time so far, Austen breaks, I'm going to call it breaking the fourth wall. Now, if you're a Trollope fan, or at least a Trollope reader, you are used to this. Trollope talks to his readers all the time. But she does it here. Let me see if I can find it fast enough. Otherwise, oh yeah, this is chapter 19 in volume 2. It is not the object of this work to give a description of Derbyshire. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. Derbyshire, nor of any of the remarkable places through which their route thither lay. So she's talking to the reader. It's not the object of this work to give a description of Derbyshire or any of the other places that they traveled. I just think that's so interesting. Does that happen anywhere else? I don't know. I will find out. But that's where I am in the book. I am sitting, by the way, in a sunspot on the floor because it's been so gray. I'm on my lunch break, and it's that time of day where sunspots end up in this room, and it's been so gray and obviously gloomy outside that I am just so delighted when there's a sunspot that shows up because it's actually sun shining. So that's where I'm sitting today. And I will probably check in after I've finished. Hello, it's me back again. Taking a break from work, I should say, to do something that I forgot to do earlier, and that is brew some tea to make some iced tea. I thought I would just chat a little bit while I'm doing this, but in the summer especially, not especially, only in the summer, I think about iced tea, and I like pretty much unsweetened iced tea, but flavored. And when I was a teenager, I had a friend who made Lipton cherry almond iced tea. She brewed the cherry almond tea and then she chilled it. And I was a teenager, like I was a senior. I was a senior in high school, but she was out of high school and on her own, and I just thought that was the coolest thing, and I just fell in love with the cherry almond. And I can't find cherry almond now. I don't think Lipton makes it. And I looked the other day, and I at least found the peach. This is oolong tea and fresh, juicy white peach flavor, and I like it. So what I do, because I don't make sun tea, is the way that we all used to in the 90s. But I just brew it with 2 bags, pretty strong, because I'm somebody, when I'm drinking regular hot tea, I am steeping the tea bag for like under a minute. Like, I don't know what it is, but I just like a kiss of tea flavor or something. I don't know, no bitterness, I guess is what I'm looking for. But so I brew 2 of these, and then I brew it longer than I normally would, sub 1 minute, and then I put ice cubes in it, because that way when I'm putting the ice cubes in it, it's not going to make it too weak. And then I stick it in the fridge, and then that way when I'm in the middle of my afternoon meetings this afternoon, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, it's like a little kick, but it's summertime, so I don't want to be drinking hot coffee. Anyway, about Jane Austen, I did want to say that, so this has been a really good experience for me, because I'm reading all kinds of classics that I've never read for the first time. And I would have never thought of picking up an Austen, probably. I can't say that would be true for the rest of my life. But just having these prompts, having a read along, the fact that it's Jane Austen July and I'm part of this booktube community got me thinking, or even aware that I just wanted to take a leap and read an Austen. And Trollope has been another discovery that I've talked a lot about, and that wasn't a read along or anything. It was just hearing a lot about Trollope. I actually think there is a read along in 2023, but I didn't join in it. I don't do well in read alongs that are just reading an author for like 6 months or something like that. I did that in 2022, and it was with Virginia Woolf, and it got me to read Virginia Woolf for the first time, so I was happy to join in. It was Mrs. Dalloway. It was Mrs. Dalloway, but it was her first book first, and then Mrs. Dalloway, and then it went on, and I dropped off just because I just wasn't interested in reading all her books at once. But it got me to read the first 2 books, and I will never forget that. It was such an experience. I just love those two books. Now with Trollope, it's a little different because it's a series, and I want to keep going in the series. I just happen to be hung up on Framley Parsonage right now. But I'm willing to suffer through. Anyway, that's a whole other subject. I'm done. I'm going to put in the ice cubes, which I will save all of you from because that's going to be noisy. And then I will put it in the fridge. Oh, our neighbor's Irish setter, hi Molly, is in the yard. Oh, is there a visiting dog? Where's that dog from? Does our neighbor know there's a, So any neighbors with dogs have invisible fences, and the dog just came out of nowhere. So I don't know what that's about. Maybe it's a visiting dog up there. I don't know. But they're friendly. And anyway, so Molly, the beautiful dog, I will get a shot of her at some point. Oh yeah, here comes our neighbor, the owner of Molly. He seems to know that dog. So yeah. Anyway, those are my thoughts. This is my tea, which will be iced tea by this afternoon's meeting. So good for me. And I'll talk to you later. Oh, here comes the owners of the errant dog. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So friendly. Anyway, back to work.
What do you see, Silk?
What do you see? Oh, are you headed towards the woodpile?
The chipmunks over there? Probably. There you go. Fierce hunter. She's not quite fast enough. Or I should say the chipmunks are faster. So far.
I've finished. I also took the book back to the library in my latest return without realizing it was in that bag. So since I last left off, a lot of important scenes happen in this book, as you Austen lovers know. Some of them are exciting subplots. Other ones are more Elizabeth-centric. One of my favorites is and maybe it's one of the most famous scenes, I don't know, is when Elizabeth and her family, they stop to see Pemberley, which is the home of Darcy, Mr. Darcy, and it's his family home. It's a beautiful place. But Darcy's not there, the housekeeper is there. She gets this wonderful impression from the housekeeper about Mr. Darcy. So that happened. And then Mr. Darcy shows up unexpectedly. And then that starts, he's so kind, he's so generous, soft. She's seeing a different side of him. Not expecting that though, because the last time they saw each other was when she told him off, refusing his proposal. But he had written a 2-page letter or so after. And then she found out some things and gotten to a place where she realized some of the things that she thought about Darcy were not the case. And so they get to see more of each other, and it ends up that everyone agrees that yes, he is the person that you should marry, and we approve of you marrying him, and he's all for it. And there's a bit of that subplot in the middle that feeds into all of the goodwill around Mr. Darcy. The way that we get to see her be surprised at how Darcy is so gracious, even though she's said so many scathing things about him and accused him of things that he actually didn't do, or maybe not in that way. We get to watch her mature through the book. And I I found that really wonderful about the story. It's a comedic romance, romantic comedy, I guess you could say. And I enjoyed it. I didn't think that I would be into this romance type writing of Austen's, but it's smart and it's complex and it's human. It's down to human folly and mistakes and growth. So I really enjoyed this experience. And I'm so happy that this book community has really led me to reading an Austen in July. I'm finishing this up this 4th of July weekend. And I'm just so happy that because of an awareness of Austen in July and hearing about that, not knowing about that before, it spurred me to pick up an Austen. I don't think I'll be reading an Austen in August. Go ahead and try one if you haven't tried one. I hope that for you Austen fans that it was interesting to walk through the experience with me reading an Austen for the first time. And for those who haven't read an Austen, perhaps this has given you a little bit of insight into her writing. But either way, thanks for joining in. This has been a really fun experience for me to record and keep track of. So thank you.